My name's Violette Mouchaileh, and for those I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I work at the Australian Energy Market Operator. My focuses going forward are probably two topics that were very nicely covered off in the introductions by Louise and also Matthew, and others as well, around distributed energy resources and the role of distributed energy resources in an energy system, an ecosystem, and data and information, because you can't talk about one without the other. And so those are my key focuses over the next sort of 12 to 24 months. So a little bit about AEMO, because I seem to start every presentation with this just to make sure everyone in the room knows who we are and what we do. So we're the independent system and market operator that operates across the east coast of Australia and the Western Australian market as well. We also work with industry and facilitate a lot of the retail market processes. So we not only kind of facilitate wholesale market arrangements in gas and electricity, but we also facilitate retail market processes, whether that's allowing businesses to connect with each other to offer services to consumers, or for businesses to connect with AEMO in order for it to perform its functions, both to run the system and to settle market as well. And also to facilitate switching processes that sit behind a lot of the things we're talking about as well. So what I'll try and cover today is a little bit around, we've talked about the fact that the consumer data right needs to cover all of the industry sectors. But I just wanted to put a bit of a lens around energy and what's happening in the energy space to start with, and then sort of talk a little bit about one specific model that sort of evolves off some of the reforms that we've implemented over the last 5 or so years, and then talk a little bit about the next steps. But where we just sort of need to start is, what are we actually trying to achieve with CDR? And it's really important, I think, as we go into the implementation phase of this really, really important reform, that we put the consumer at the heart of that. And you might all be sitting there going, that's a bit weird for the system and market operator to say that, but it's not, because our remit is really to make sure we deliver outcomes for consumers, whether that's operating the system, whether that's facilitating processes between parties. That's really at the heart of what we're trying to do, particularly as we move to a much more distributed world. And so with that, we're trying to create, we talked about data portability, data liquidity and access is at the heart of that. Timely access is a very, very important part. Data security, we need to balance portability with access, and making sure we take into account some of the sort of sector-specific opportunities that we have in energy as well, to really lead. And we can learn from the UK and the US, which I'm very keen to do, but how do we actually take those learnings and actually take it in a different direction as well? Because we do lead in a lot of spaces around the penetration of distributed resources and the opportunities that come with that. And so too, I think we have an opportunity to lead in some of the data portability space, taking into account data security and access issues. This is very high. I wish I wore higher. So now sort of turning a little bit to the energy landscape. So I know that we are trying to design something that operates across all sectors, but one thing I want to make very clear is we're not banking and we're not telco. I think there's a lot of common aspects across banking and telco, but I think there are some unique characteristics in energy that are important in helping us design and shape what that future framework needs to look like, while obviously needing to fit within a broader national regime. So in energy, we do have a system and a market operator, AEMO, who delivers energy services to the industry and facilitates outcomes for the industry to serve the consumer. Data plays a really important role in two spaces. So it tries to support a system operation function, and that's really important probably as we discuss things today and tomorrow around the role of data, helping us to actually run a system, run a market, but it also is actually trying to facilitate transactive-based markets and services as well. So it's actually both in the energy space, it's not one or the other. The energy landscape is changing quite significantly and probably will do so over the next couple of years. We're seeing consumers having multiple relationships with multiple parties. not just retailers but third parties. No one person holds all the data in energy. It's actually a combination of people, and going forward as the system sort of moves and changes, we'll see that evolve even more. Consumers switch quite readily in energy, and should some of the ACCC recommendations out of their retail inquiry get implemented, and we're looking to put some rule changes into the AMC this month around customer switching, where we're looking to reduce the customer switching time to 2 days, that is likely to accelerate choices for consumers around moving much more readily, as opposed to the average 60 to 90 days sort of switch. How do we actually get that down so consumers actually can look at the information and make choices not that come into effect 6 months down the track? And parties need at least 12 months worth of data. It's not just 2 months. I think you need a bit of a history, particularly when I'm talking about third parties who are looking to package services, because you need to take into account seasonal and other factors when you're delivering services. So you don't want to just look at winter and then offer something to the consumer that may not be fit for a 12-month period, taking into account seasonal aspects. We have a range of players in the energy market. So if I just focus on electricity, we have over 268 registered retailers, or what we call FRUMPs, in the system, that actually service over 10 million individual connection points in the system. So, and we have a mix of very large players and quite a lot of small players as well. And that's really, really important when you're thinking about how third parties and the market players need to be able to actually access and exchange data between each other to service the consumer. And this point is really, really important when we start to think about the objectives of CDR. So I have to really move it along. And not only do I want to just paint the picture around some of the static sort of environment, but the environment's actually moving. We're not a one-way push to the consumer. It's actually a two-way system that we are looking to sort of move into. We're actually there now, where the consumer is not just consuming and taking from a retailer, it's actually participating much more actively in the provision of energy, even behind the meter. So it's not a one-way system, it's actually a two-way system, which has implications for how you operate the system, for how you operate the market, and how you introduce different players into the market to deliver the right services to consumers. So they're not bombarded with all the information, it's the right information. So one of the things I just wanted to draw upon, and I think we talked a little bit about the three models, but I did want to talk a little bit around the shared market protocol, which is the eHub, a little bit, because it's really important when we think about some of the reforms that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot that's actually gone in the industry. So as part of the power of choice reforms and some of the AMC work that's been done, there were recommendations around the development of a shared market protocol, which is a sort of effectively a communication platform for the exchange of information and data that connects all the players in the market, not just retailers, but we've got networks, we've got metering providers, we've got metering coordinators, we've got embedded networks, we've got a range of third parties really designed to reduce barriers to trade and access through this communication platform. And it will continue to evolve over time to make sure that it meets obviously the requirements of new protocols, and going forward, CDR, should we decide to utilise this particular communication platform. What it enables us to do, and I know, I'm sorry, one more minute, is if we do leverage this eHub properly, it means we have a flexible framework for, it doesn't matter who holds the data, whether it's AEMO or some other party, you're able to come to this place, and if AEMO has the data, you can get the data from AEMO. If AEMO doesn't have the data, we'll get it through this eHub process. And that's the key. Data holders will evolve over time. No one single party will hold all the data now or into the future, and that's really important when we start thinking about the design of this. And some of the opportunities that we do potentially start to create are some of the ones I've actually talked about here, about reducing some of the inefficiencies, not having a system for for retail processes that's different to consumer data right and access to data, and thinking about how the opportunities to evolve it too, the potential for this to obviously enable greater services to consumer, for it to service comparative sites, to enable comparative sites to be linked to switching, innovative services and service offerings, if that base data is able to be openly accessed with the right incentives. And we completely acknowledge that the number one priority in designing this thing is around security. And one of the things AEMO's been working with the industry and been tasked to work with the industry is to uplift the industry around cybersecurity. And just in terms of next steps, we're working very, very closely with the ACCC and Data 61, and would love to continue that with the industry as well. There's obviously CDR legislation, but the one point I'll make before I close, I think there's a really unique opportunity as well, and we're very open-minded to it, is the use of prototypes. And how do we actually test and trial on a small scale and learn and extend, rather than the traditional bing bang approach, which we've all been there before. So I really do think there's an opportunity in the CDR space for us to do it a little bit differently and get the right outcomes for consumers as well.